Hi guys, Jane here, and I am here to tell you about my most recent novel, The Alpha's Niece, and actually the sequel to this. This is supposed to be part of a 5-book series. Well, a 4 books and a tie-in, I guess I should say. And the next one is going to be coming out in January, and I'm hoping to have them all. I've got them all first drafted. I've got the second one second drafted, so I'm hoping to do a fairly quick release once January hits and I want to get them all out. It'll depend on how my editor's booked or not booked. So I've got to work with him on that because 5 books to edit is a lot, or 4 books because this one's already done. So, The Alpha's Niece. It follows Remember and Cyrus. Remember is a woman, or she's a werewolf. Both of them are werewolves. She was, this, by the way, is right after the Civil War. He was a veteran in the Civil War. He's an amputee based because of fighting in the war. Even though he's a werewolf, like he got his leg completely blown off, so there was just no saving it. This is years after the war, and Remember gets pregnant through rape. And she doesn't want to marry the father, obviously. And in that time period, that was actually something I learned was fairly common. If you were a woman and you were raped, but he was, a guy in good standing, it didn't matter. And she was raped by somebody who was fairly wealthy and who has pack standing. He's actually the heir to an alpha ship. He's an alpha's son. So her uncle, though, is an alpha in another pack, and she begs her alpha to find, or her uncle to find her a husband so that she doesn't have to marry the terrible person who raped her. Obviously, his name is Jordan, by the way. So her uncle, his name is Isaac. He goes to Cyrus, and he says, "Hey, I need a favor." Well, Cyrus really owes Isaac because Cyrus had run away from the pack to join the war effort when he was a teenager, got his leg blown off, and come back. And one thing in the story and in the culture of the werewolf packs in the story is, personal strength and your ability to fight with the pack is a huge deal. So having a 3-legged werewolf is kind of problematic. It's just not. He lost his leg. He's not strong, and it was something he did outside of the bounds of the pack. So it wasn't like his alpha sent him on a mission and he was injured. It was he ran off. He wasn't even supposed to be in the war, and then he gets all injured, and now he's less used to the pack. So Cyrus, of course, says, "Okay, yeah, I'll marry your niece because I owe you." And Remember shows up, and she has terrible, terrible, terrible PTSD from her attack. So he's a doctor, and he kind of is seeing all these things happening to her, and she's having panic attacks all over the place, and it's just a mess. But he slowly, because he's so kind and so good. He's very much a beta male. If you've watched any of my other videos, you know I love my beta males. He's a country doctor. He is, a very good guy. And he kind of helps her heal. And eventually, her child is born, and the biological father wants to come get the child, and they fight him off, and just all kinds of stuff happens in the book. It's been a lot of fun to write. I really, really love this book. People did not love the character names, but I do. Remember actually was the name of a baby that was born on the Mayflower, and because of the character I was creating and the vulnerability with her and her situation, I thought the name Remember was really appropriate. I don't actually remember where I found Cyrus, but I saw it and I'm like, oh, that is his name, and I love it. If I were to describe this book to people, I would say this book is Little House on the Prairie, but with werewolves. Now, I mean that as in the show, not like the books. I've read the books a long time ago, but I was obsessed with Little House on the Prairie. And one of the things I loved about the series is that bad things happened. It was real. It was very much, these are things that are happening in this time and in this world and in history, and some of it's going to be tragic. In the Little House on the Prairie, you have Mary, who goes blind. You have Albert, who has a morphine addiction at one point. So it's very raw and real. And again, not all of it, because Little House on the Prairie, there was a certain level of, and everybody's gonna end up okay except for Albert, who dies at the end at some point. Sorry to spoil that if you're a huge Little House on the Prairie fan and haven't seen that episode. And I haven't seen where he dies. I just saw him like with the nose bleeding, and Albert was my first crush as a child, or as a little girl, so I was just devastated that he was diagnosed terminal. But anyway, this book, in the way of, it does deal with certain issues of the time, and there are some historic points that are pretty rough. And it's not glossed over, it's not overly romanticized. It is pretty raw in some places. But I love it, and I think that was a good thing and fun thing about writing it. So how did I come up with the story? Well, if any of you remember, my third book was Wedding the Widow, and I had an amputee, and I wanted another amputee because I was a really interesting thing to look at. Now, in Wedding the Widow, my amputee's name is Augustus, and his girlfriend ran off after he became an amputee and decided not to marry him. I didn't want to do something like that because I'd already done that, but I did want Cyrus to have some kind of self-esteem issues because of his leg. And so that was one thing that worked really well in a werewolf story, is he's not seen as powerful and as valuable as the other wolves, at least to himself, because of this missing leg. And he is literally a 3-legged werewolf. When he becomes a werewolf, he has 3 legs. So that was a big part of where the story came from. It was also a combination of another story that I'd written when I was a teenager. I'd written a story as a teenager about a girl named Dawn who was raped by her boyfriend Jordan. And she becomes pregnant, and Jordan basically tells her to kiss his butt. And so she ends up married to, in this old story, she ended up married to her best friend. And they were high school students, because I was a high school student and it was just a fantasy. It made no sense. And I've wanted to kind of try to change it and make it into a novel, because I loved my characters, and especially the guy in it. He was so great, but I just couldn't make it a reasonable novel. It all read like a 14-year-old's fantasy, because that's what it was. But I did take that element in there of, her getting raped and, having to kind of learn to love with somebody she really could trust. And especially when it comes to the intimacy, I drew a lot of inspiration from that early work of, you can't just automatically recover from something like that. And I think of all the things in this book, I really loved the bedroom scenes the most. I think they were very emotional, very well done, and one of the best bedroom scenes I have done in a book. So I'm really excited about this. Other fun fact. So the place that they live is called Barton, and the whole series is called the Barton Pack series. So when I wrote the first draft, there were actually 3 different towns. There was Pumpkin Vista or something like that. They were awful corny names, because in first drafts you can totally do that. There was Bear Creek, Wolf Lake, and this Pumpkin. And that was the division of, there's werebears that live in this town, there's werewolves, and then there's just humans. Well, I decided instead to change the name to Beartown, and then I decided to change it to Barton. So Barton is actually kind of a shortening of Beartown, which was the original name I was going to call it, because you do have this group of werebears as well who live near the werewolves. If you've read my other books, you know that in my stories, at least thus far, werebears are genetically descended from Native Americans. So you have these people who are actually Native Americans, African mixes in this town, and they are the werebears. I do have a werebear romance coming. It's actually an MM romance, and it is a tie-in to this series, but it's not a direct book in the series, because I know some people who read werewolf don't go to werebear, and also who read straight romances don't do romances. But that is a tie-in here that I'm counting, and it's already written, and I'm so excited about it. And that one's called Bewitching the Bear. So the books in the series are The Alpha's Niece, She Wolf Wanted, which should be coming out in January if all goes well, if my editor can get it back to me in time. Bewitching the Bear, which is the romance that is not directly in the series, but it's a tie-in, and a couple things do happen connected to the main characters and timeline of the story. Second Chance Wolf, and The Ugly Wolfling. So I'm so excited about the series, and I really, I encourage you, if you like Little House on the Prairie and werewolves, to give it a chance and see if you enjoy it. I'm just so stoked. But this has been a really educational read or writing for me. I learned a lot about the history. I got to go to Iowa and research the time period, and it's so much fun. This is definitely a book that was written for love, and it turned out really well, and I'm really proud of it. So that's what I wanted to tell you about The Alpha's Niece. I hope if you've read it and you enjoy it, and if you have read it, just know that there's more coming, and I'm just so stoked about the series. All right, guys, thanks. Bye.